Good afternoon, dear friends. We all are so very glad to be here on Saturday, January 14th, to celebrate the publication of two recent books by Charles Stein. Everything That Seems Must Seem to Be, the poem of Parmenides, will be published by Station Hill Press probably this month. The image of the front cover was shown at the beginning of the recording of this event. The Light of Hermes Trismegistus, new translations of 7 essential Hermetic texts, was brought out by Inner Traditions in November of 2022. I'm Kimberly, Lyons, publisher of Lunar Chandelier Press, and I host poetry readings virtually more or less once a month. This is a special event co-hosted with Sam Truitt, Executive Director of Station Hill Press, and of course we have present today the founders of Station Hill, George and Susan Quasha. Our readers are Michael Boughn, Billie, Chernicoff, Dorota, Czerner, Mitch, Highfill, Robert Kelly, Joel Newberger, George Quasha, Alana, Siegal, Nathan Smith, Charles Stein, and Sam Truitt. They will read from and briefly comment on Stein's translation into English from the Greek and Latin of Hesiod's Theogony, the Homeric hymn to Hermes, the poem of Parmenides, the Poimandres from the Corpus Hermeticum, the Chaldean oracles, the vision of Isis from Apuleius's Metamorphosis, and On Divine Virtue by Zosimus of Panopolis. Charles Stein will make remarks about the necessity of the Parmenides project and will engage in conversation with the viewers and readers. Short bios on the readers were posted at the start of the recording. And it is my honor and pleasure to introduce Charles Stein. Charles Stein is a poet and independent scholar with a PhD in literature from the University of Connecticut and a bachelor's degree in ancient Greek from Columbia University. The author of several books of poetry, including From Murmur's Head, as well as literary works such as Persephone Unveiled and The Secret of the Black Chrysanthemum. He lives in Berrytown, New York. Stein's work comprises a complexly integrated field of poems, prose reflections, translations, drawings, photographs, lectures, conversations, and performances, in quotes, to allow for, as it were, thaumaturgic transformation at practically all levels of structure, end quote. Known for his engaged articulation of intersections of philosophy, poetics, visual art, magic, and spiritualities, he has read his work and engaged with poetry communities globally via teaching, readings, and conferences and talks. And now Sam Truitt, Executive Director of Station Hill Press.
Except is the daughters of the sun that is driving this vehicle, and to her goes all praise. She made this happen. This is why we're here today. And yeah, I have to say it's a inestimable honor to be publishing Chuck's work on Parmenides, this offering from the Parmenides Project, a long time coming. And in fact, just a little bit longer we'll have to wait. We're still a little bit in solution, but we should have the book done in about a month. And it is required reading. It is the threshold beyond which we, is beyond mine. So I'm really happy to be here. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Kim. Need I say more?
Probably you will need to say more, but there'll be time, and thank you for your kind words. We've all worked beautifully together as a group. Okay, so Chuck, I would like to invite you to go forth and speak about some things.
Okay, now let's see. I'm unmuted, correct? You hear
Yes,
my
you are.
words?
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear my growls? Can you hear my etc.? Okay, the idea was that I was going to speak a bit about the Parmenides project in general, what it is and why the Parmenides poem seems to appear in the middle of every book I write. A version of the translation of the poem of Parmenides appears in Persephone Unveiled, which was something like the prequel to the Hermes book. That is to say, I kind of think of them as companion books. One is a book about the Eleusinian mysteries, with a translation of the Homeric hymn to Demeter. And of course, the other is about this Hermes figure that we'll hear plenty today. The Parmenides project, what that is has to do with the fact that I've been practicing contemplative practices, meditation, etc., since I was a teenager. And I practiced in any number of different contexts, sort of what they used to call shopping for an actual context for something I was doing already. I should say, and just out of disclosure, that shopping stopped about 40 years ago, and I'm now a practitioner in the Siegal community of Namkhai Norbu Rinpoches. But the Parmenides business came from a kind of not formal but ongoing search for the sites within Western thinking that linked on with these practices that I was concerned with, mostly Buddhism later on, but early on. And Parmenides is the pre-Socratic philosopher from about 480 BC that has been a source of interest and speculation throughout the entire 2,500 years of Western philosophy. Never with any real claim that anybody understands exactly what he was about. But what he does say is that the only thing that really is being itself. And the Parmenides project partly involved looking for the way in which that is expressed in his one poem and various sites in all of the different esoteric traditions around the world that it looked to me like it was saying the essence of. So I made a decision in around 1991 or two that I would assume that my intuition about the Parmenides poem was true, just assuming that. I'm not arguing it in a scholarly context. It's more about the future possible use of Parmenides than it is something that is simply historical. And I took that on, and I've been actually working at it for all of this time up until recently. And the different translations of the text that I've presented are different only in details and do represent a kind of continuing meditation and thought about that figure. And the whole thing about Parmenides is that it presents itself as standing outside of everything that comes after that's influenced by it. It's as if it were a warning to say, don't do metaphysics. But to do that not from a nihilistic point of view, but from a point of view that the very concrete fact of existence itself is the very site of our, or should be, the site of our reverence and our connection with anything like ultimate reality. That the word being, as it's used in Parmenides' thought, is a unique word. It isn't something that can be replaced by Welt, world ghost, world geist, world soul, world view, existence, reality. None of those words actually cuts to the site that the word being comes to. I don't know that this is any clearer than anything that I've ever written. I've been trying to introduce this project since I began it. And it's not so much that I'm propounding a doctrine as I'm making a suggestion for the possible contexts for a contemplative life that would not be confined literally to any of the particular traditions which to a certain extent command being and capture it and cover it over by the terms of the particular philosophical, religious, or whatever other sense of views. In other words, the idea is that whenever one tries to say what the ultimate reality is, they cover over the fact that what's at concern is being. All right. I mean, obviously, I could go on the whole day with just sort of trying to make myself clear about that, but I'll give that up there and begin by reading the opening verses of Hesiod's Theogony from my translation. So this is, I don't know, 50, 60 lines, something like that, maybe even less. And then we'll go on from there. So this is the Theogony of Hesiod, the poet that's mythologically roughly contemporary with Homer. Neither of these people have any really clear dates, or it's not even clear that they're actually people. Although Hesiod seems more like one. There's more biography about him than there is, say, about Homer. Anyway, this is his poem about the origins of the gods. With the Heliconian muses, let us begin our music. They hold Mount Helicon great and holy, and dance on gentle feet about its spring of violet water, and about the altar of Cronos' mighty son. And they bathe their tender bodies in the Permesus, and in the spring of the horse and holy Omeus, and dance their beautiful dances, most delightful, with leaping feet at the summit of Mount Helicon. From there they arise, and veiled in many vapors, make their way by night, emitting most beautiful music. Hymns to Zeus, Aegis holder, and Lady Hera of Argos, who walks on sandals of gold. And the daughter of Zeus, Aegis holder, gray green-eyed Athena, and Phoebus Apollo and Artemis, careful of arrows, and Poseidon, earth holder, earth shaker, and numinous Themis and Aphrodite with helical glances, and Hebe with the golden garland and beautiful Dione, and Leto, Iapetus, and Kronos, crooked in council, Eos and Helios, the great light, and Selene, and Gaia and great Okeanos and Black Night, and the holy tribe of all the other immortals, whose being is always. Once they taught Hesiod beautiful song, as he tended his lambs under holy Mount Helicon. And this is what the goddesses first said to me, those Olympian muses, daughters of Zeus, Aegis holder. Wild shepherds, foul occasions for shame, monstrous bellies. We know how to tell many lies and make them sound likely. And we know when we wish it, how to sing things that are true. So said the sleek-tongued daughters of great Zeus. And they gave me a scepter of laurel they plucked as it blossomed, and blew a singer's voice into my own, that I might sing things past and of the future. And they bade me praise the gods who are forever, and always to sing of themselves as the start, at the start and the close. Okay.
Chuck, thank you so much. And we'll circle back around to a discussion of that. That was a beautiful start. Billie Chernicoff.
Congratulations on the publication of these magnificent and important books. And Kim and Sam, thank you for this occasion and for including me. I am going to read a passage from Theogony about the creation of the first woman, and then never having really graduated spiritually from high school, I treated Chuck. Congratulations on the publication of these magnificent and important books. And Kim and Sam, thank you for this occasion and for including me. I am going to read a passage from Theogony about the creation of the first woman, and then never having really graduated spiritually from high school, I treated Kim's prompts like a homework assignment, So I wrote some homework, and after I read the passage, I'm going to read my homework, and the whole thing will take about 10 minutes. So first, Chuck's translation from this wonderful book. So Prometheus has just stolen fire for humankind, and Prometheus also called son of Lapetos. And this passage starts with Zeus speaking, saying, "Son of Lapetos, studied in cunning beyond all other beings, it seems to me, good sir, that you have not abandoned your wily tactics." So spoke Zeus, whose sagacity is unsurpassable in anger. He refused to discount the ruse and denied unquenchable fire to slight Prometheus to the race of mortal men born from ashes who dwell on earth. But the excellent son of Lapidos fooled him again. He stole the gleam of fire visible from afar and hid it in a fennel stalk. And this gashed loud thundering Zeus to the bottom of his spirit. His heart fumed when he saw the gleam of fire visible from afar, gleaming among the humans. And now he sent an entity in action that would in her own right prove a bane to humans. Their acquisition of fire from Prometheus notwithstanding. The famous limping deity Hephaestus composed out of earth a shy maiden according to instructions from the Cronian, and the goddess green-eyed Athena gave her a maiden's girdle and decked her out in silver raiment and hung a veil from her brow intricately embroidered and a wonder to behold. And Pallas Athena placed about her head a garland of flowers from fresh grown herbs, and placed above her head a golden crown that limping Hephaestus crafted with his own hands as a favor to Father Zeus. He wrought upon it many curious devices. Ferocious beasts that land and ocean nurture. And this is the most amazing of the many things he created, simulacra of living beings, including their voices. And from that coronet, great beauty glowed. But when the god completed that thing of egregious beauty, as price for the blessing of fire, he led her out for mortal men and the other gods to gaze at. So that delighting both in her and her accoutrements, which the gray green-eyed daughter of a mighty sire had fitted her out, wonder took hold of gods and mortal men alike. The genus of woman as such descends from this creature, as they ogled this thing of sheer witchery, irresistible to men. The genus of woman as such descends from this creature to the mortal males they live with a great vexation, of no assistance at all in grinding poverty, helpmeets in prosperity only, as bees in thatch-roofed hives feed drones by nature, miscreant. The other bees all day until sundown are busy about the white wax combs while the drones stay inside the hive, parasitic on the labor of others. So Zeus made women by nature, to exhibit a propensity for waywardness, a bane to the tribe of male mortals. Stop there and read my homework. Hesiod tells the story of the first woman twice. originally here in his Theogony and later in Works and Days, where she is given a name, Pandora and a jar full of troubles. In Theogony, she has no name and no jar, though she does have some extraordinary clothes. In Hesiod's rapturous text, Pandora is both a woman and a vision meant to be beheld, not only to enchant, but to confuse and vex. She is secretive, veiled, even as she is led out to be gazed at openly. She is delightful and she is a bane. She embodies the strange and marvelous and conflict, transgression and danger. And by virtue of these qualities, which are the essence both of Eros and Poesis, she herself constitutes a mystery text, inviting all who behold her to read her, the first poem, with the poem's power to enthrall. The universal response to her is wonder in gods and mortal men alike. Like the Isis vision of Apuleius and like Cinderella, among other feminine super beings, Pandora has a wonder dress and other magical clothing that shines like the sun and moon, made for her by the gods. Among her adornments, oddly, she has 2 crowns. Athena places about her head a garland of flowers with all of the freshness and beauty of the natural world, its fecundity and archetypally feminine symbolism. But Zeus asks Hephaestus to make a second crown for Pandora of gold, and this crown Athena places above the woman's head. This magical crown is wrought with the ferocious beasts of land and sea, and Hesiod says of it remarkably that it is the single most amazing thing Hephaestus ever created, with its simulacra of living beings, including their voices. Pandora is crowned with the voice of ferocious primordial being itself. With her crown, only Pandora rivals Zeus's ability to transform himself into beasts and to speak with their voices. This is a fundamental source of erotic power for Zeus, allowing him to ravish gods and mortals at will in the form of swan, bull, snake, eagle. Other than Zeus, only one other character in the Theogony has powers comparable to that of Pandora's crown, and this is Typhon with his 100 uncanny snake heads and their uncanny voices, as Chuck translates it, that bellow like a bull and roar like a lion. When Typhon challenges Zeus's rule of the cosmos, Zeus annihilates him. Yet Zeus crowns a shy maiden with the primordial voice of the cosmos. Pandora becomes the bearer and keeper of the creative power of this crown made just for her, wearing it above her head as if a symbol of a higher esoteric purpose. Pandora is an erotic figure not only by virtue of her beauty, her difference and otherness, but by virtue of her wildness, her connection to these original fierce voices of the cosmos. Like Eve in her disobedience and intimacy with the primeval voice of the serpent, Pandora is charged with the task of bringing consciousness to human being. It makes sense then that Hesiod describes her as being of no practical use, no assistance at all in grinding poverty, a parasitic drone bee whose only work, as we know, is erotic, a miscreant by nature. Pandora is lifted like Cinderella beyond household drudgery into the realm of magic and art. Her curious devices, propensity for waywardness and witchery, all in Chuck's translation, are apt descriptors for poet or poetry itself. Pandora is created in the Theogony to punish Prometheus' theft of fire, Once the basic need of mortals for warmth and food has been met, Pandora appears, for fire also provides the means for creation and craftsmanship. Pandora represents desire, which is beyond need, beyond survival. Fashioned and endowed with all gifts by the gods, she is a work of art. Not only all gifted, but all giving. In his commentary on the Theogony, Chuck points out that Hesiod presents not only the coming into being of the gods, but the establishment of cosmos and social order. The poem creates deities, the world, and the being of the people. Pandora appears exactly in the middle of Theogony. There is the cosmos before Pandora and the cosmos after. The being before Pandora and being after, social order before Pandora and after. I'm not the first to read the presence of a subtle and complex text alongside or beyond Pandora as a manifestation of an ancient hatred of women. In her inspired and meticulous book, Pandora's Senses, Vered Lev Kanan moves beyond a critique of misogynist culture and language, tracing the irreducible presence of Pandora in the space of ancient literature. So let me close with an example of her insight into the figure of the first woman and its telling. And this is the rest of this, a quote. Pandora is not simply an object in the world, a beautiful thing in a given visual field. She is made to be seen, and her identity is thus defined by her beholders. At the same time, she is the very force that structures the field of the visual. Her beauty stimulates the first visual experience that men have. In fact, she initiates men's capacity as beholders. The appearance of the first woman thus marks a turning point in human consciousness. The shocking effect of her sight releases mankind from its unreflecting existence in the world, opening up the possibility of a standing vis-a-vis the world and allowing humanity to differentiate itself from the universe. Pandora's ultimate gift to humanity is the gift of wonder. And in Theogony, she serves as the modus operandi for the cosmological meditation. Pandora has a crucial role in shaping the poetics of Hesiod's cosmological poem. She helps to establish the aesthetic dimension of the world, and as such, she may be understood as the Theogony's main protagonist.
Billie, thank you so much for that rich reading and insight. Oh my gosh, I'm just full of thoughts.
I would like to comment. It is extraordinary to hear this work. Yesterday was Friday the 13th, which is the day that holds hatred of women, in that it was claimed to be unlucky day. Actually, it is a very lucky day.
Lucky for poets.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, can I speak?
Of course.
Am I there?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that was an amazing reading. One of the things I was hoping for is that people would take it beyond what I actually would do. If I were to present that version of Pandora, pretty much exactly as Billie, as you do it. I would be thinking in terms of a lost Aphrodite, really, a lost version of the feminine that is being co-opted by Hesiod to be brought into the Olympian fold. You see what I'm saying is one of my themes is that the gods that are conquered in the theogony and become the members of the main inhabitants of Mount Olympus is about that the theogony poem is like drawing all these beings from another world, from a pre-Hellenic culture. And therefore, what survives in them are precisely values of the kind that you speak, not as expressing Hesiod's view, but as his attempt to sublimate, co-opt, turn them into proper Olympian figures. But that nonetheless, those qualities that you describe are actually resonant within the poem, but really from a prior time, from the time in which all of these things are being brought together.
Yeah.
So I agree with the vision of it very much, but it wasn't, I couldn't do everything. So thank you.
Could I say something?
Who you be?
I be Roni Stanley, but I do something having to do with pop culture, which is that the name of the alternative universe that wins out against humans in the Avatar is Pandora. And I love that universe, Pandora. I just watched that film last night. And to have you talk about Pandora here, I thought was so much synchronicity.
So Pandora is present. Thank you so much for that insertion. That is very, very interesting. Billie, did you want to say anything more before we move on to the next text?
Absolutely not.
Okay. All right. So, Michael Boughn?
Yeah, hi. Aren't I lucky I get to follow the inimitable Billie Chernicoff? Hi, Billie. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm going to read a passage from the Homeric hymn to Hermes. I have a company with me for the event. I chose this because, first of all, I love story. I love narrative. I love the way that meaning is yielded in the details of event. And I love this particular story because I find myself strongly attracted to the characters, and especially the main character, Hermes. The hymn is not unlike, actually, a novel by Elmore Leonard. And I love Elmore Leonard. I love his fictions, and I have ever since Joanne Kiger gave me a copy of Bandits in the 80s. And the title, Bandits, says it all in a way. It could be the title of the Homeric hymn itself. It gives us a Hermes whose complex character embodies a full range of meaning, from the darkness of the brutal slaying of the tortoise after he's born, to the immense gift of music that he gives to Apollo at the end of the poem. But the emphasis for me is on his roguishness. A rogue is an uncertain figure, potentially dangerous, but equally attractive because of the way he plays beyond the rules. He's beyond the rules of playing, but he's still playing. Like a lot of characters in Elmore Leonard's novel, he charms us with the ease of his deceptions, the fluidity of his young larcenous mind as it invents and reinvents itself within the turbulence of authorities' interventions. Everywhere he brings a playful discord, but the discord ends with the magic of music and poetry a gift that exceeds all the wrongs. It opens Apollo to a new realm of beauty, a new mode of music beyond the Olympian formalism of his previous determination. And that's what Hermes does. He leads us always to the boundary where a herm marks, according to Carl Karenyi, the location of a spring to refresh the wanderers as we continue on our journeys. Then, by the way, you Greek speakers, you'll have to please forgive me my mangling of the Greek names. Then strong Ariphantes examined the locality with a furtive flash in his eyes and grew sure that he'd be able to mollify the worthy son of Leto, though the latter was ever stronger. He set his lyre on his left arm. He tried each string with the plectrum. It sounded just fantastic under his fingers. It sounded, Phoebus Apollo laughed with joy. The lovely sound of the lyre ravished his heart with ineffable music. As he listened, sweet longing arose in his soul. Then the son of Maia, playing sweetly on his instrument, made bold to stand to the left of Phoebus Apollo and started to sing. And the voice that came out was a good voice, singing of the immortal gods, how they came into being, how each was allotted its portion. First among the deities, he honored in song Mnemosyne, the mother of the muses, for the son of Maia was of her lineage. Then, according to their ages, the rest of the gods, how each came into being, striking the lyre on his arm. But in his heart, an unappeasable longing overcame Apollo, and he gave voice to winged words. Slayer of oxen, trickster, even at your work, feast companion, your music is worth the price of 50 cows. Therefore, I think our litigation should be settled peacefully. Do tell me, though, O ever resourceful son of Zeus and Maia, did this magical activity of yours belong to you from birth? Or did some god or human bestow so wonderfully worthy a gift upon you, imparting godlike song? For marvelous is this newly manifested sonic phenomena I hear, which I say no mortal or immortal has ever experienced before except for you. O felon son of Maia, what skill is this? What cure for incurable cares? What sort of practice? For particularly there are implicit in this music 3 things from which to choose: good cheer, good sex, sweet slumber. I myself am partial to the Olympian muses, music for choral dancing, brilliant song, flourishing sounds, and the resounding thrill of flutes. But I've never been moved by the spectacular agilities of performers at young people's parties as I have by this music now. I marvel, son of Zeus, at your lovely playing. Though you are but a little one, you know such glorious skill. So come, dear fellow, and respect the word of your elders, for you'll be renowned among the immortal gods, both you and your mother. By this javelin of Cornell wood, I make you a leader, fortunate and famous among the gods, and give you bright gifts, and not deceive you ever. Hermes responded to Apollo, still with cunning discourse. You question me, O one who acts from a distance circumspectly, but I do not in any way deny you access to my art. Indeed, I wish to be compliant in thought and word. You already know all things very well in your heart, for you are situated first among the immortals, noble and strong. Wise Zeus appropriately loves you, has given you bright gifts. They say that from his words, O distant doer, you have learned the prerogatives of the deities and Zeus's oracle to boot, and indeed the entirety of his divine pronunciamentos. I myself have gleaned that you have acquired great wealth in such matters, so you can learn what you choose, whatever you long for. Since apparently your heart is set on the lyre, go ahead, sing, play on it, receive it as a gift from me. Strike up the splendor, but remember to give proper credit for it to me. Sing well while holding this clear-voiced friend in your hands. You are already quite capable of uttering all that is beautiful and well composed in language. Hereafter, with confidence, take it to young people's parties, to splendid revels, to lovely choral dances, spreading joy by night and day. Whomever dexterously inquires with art and wisdom of it, it will instruct with its utterance in all manner of things delightful to the mind. It is easily played with gentle familiarities, but it flees the miseries of technical toil. Whoever requires it, however, in artless fury, will find it to respond with lofty sounding, airy fluctuations, vain expressions, and just plain wrong notes. But you can learn what you choose, whatever you long for. So I will give you that lyre, O son of Zeus, and I, for my part, will go out and work in the pasture with wild ranging cattle on hills or horse fostering meadows. There are cows and bulls will bring forth promiscuously, abundantly, males and females, nor will it be necessary for you to hold on to your anger. So speaking, he held out the lyre, and Phoebus Apollo took it and freely gave the shining whip to Hermes in exchange and dubbed him a herdsman. The son of Maia happily accepted it, and now the son of Leto, Lord Apollo, who shoots from afar, setting the lyre on his left arm, tried each string with the prick, and it sounded just wonderful under his fingers, and the god sang very beautifully to its notes. Thank you.
Michael, thank you. That was so rich and just joyful. Thank you so much. Loved hearing the word wonderful. Joel, are you ready?
Sure, yeah. I have a short text that I'll read first, and then I'm going to read from the very beginning to the hymn. I had thought that Michael was going to read this episode with the turtle that begins the hymn, but he didn't, so I'll read that as well as the one that just follows where Hermes steals the cows. So what I like best about Chuck's book is that it restores Hermes in himself and as a living God to the world of our knowing and our living. It is not a book, and maybe Chuck would disagree with this, but in my view, it's not a book about the Hermetic, but about and of Hermes himself. In the translations, but especially in the commentaries, it alerts us to his presence in what we are and what we do. Hermes is here. Hermes is not a personification of an abstract principle. The prevalence of the abstract or the impersonal is the night in which Hermes hides in his cave. Chuck asks in his notes to the hymn, what are the cows of Apollo? What are they? And who is Hermes? Those are the questions I would try to think about. I do not know what the cows are. But I think, or I've been thinking, that the work of the poet and the cry of the poet is to free the cows, just as the hero's task is to slay the dragon. We know Calvert Watkins has his undying fame from his book that describes the formulaic variations on the slaying of the dragon, and also showing this formula at the very roots of myth-making as the very essence of a poetic grammar. The theft of cows in Indo-European myth is as common as dragon killing. This hymn makes me think that all poetry might be a version of the sentence, Hermes steals the cows. To free the cows like slaying the dragon is, as Chuck says, to keep things moving. We might say in turn that to keep things moving in the agilities of the mind and of measure is to free the cows, to be Hermes. I remember that in the Rig Veda, the divine twins, the Ashwins, are praised in these lines. Just as Indra, at killing the Vritra, once won the elixir, so have won it the Ashwins. Triumphant, they cleft the mountain and freed those cows with known might, whose prowess was seen. Later in the same hymn, we read, Ye Ashwins, ye free the cows, so we live. To free the cows is the magic of a line of poetry, which opens the gates and releases the waters of the mind. This hymn in particular, with its spontaneous inventions, its sudden inversions, its rapid displacements, in which Hermes himself has a hand, has shimmering intercourse constantly with that precious property of the god. We do not go back to the hymn. It comes brilliant and wily to rustle our cows. But the poem itself has and takes no property. It doesn't keep for itself the life that it wins. Just so, on the banks of the Tiber, Cacus steals the cows that Hercules himself has stolen to keep it moving. And this hymn ends by promising to sing another song and to be mindful of Hermes, who drives the strong cows into the light. So this is from just 10 lines after the beginning. This is what we read. She bore a child of winning wiles, a creature of infinite devices, cattle driver, dream conductor, watcher by night, thief at the gates, a creature soon to manifest notable accomplishments among the gods. Dawn-born, by midday he was plucking the lyre, by sundown he'd pilfered the sacred cows of Apollo. All this on the 4th of the month, the day that Lady Maya bore him. Once he'd leaped from his mother's womb, he tarried not at all about the winnowing basket she used as a cradle, but vaulted the threshold of the high-roofed cave and went after those cows. In the cave yard was a turtle, in whom he discerned 1,000 pleasures to come. Hermes indeed was first to turn the silent turtle to making music. The tardily waddling creature was eating high grass blades just outside the dwelling. The messenger, quick as death, laughed and addressed it. It's a sign, good fortune for me, and so soon. I do not reject or deny it. Hello, O soul of the dance beat. Oh, lovely to look at, Hetaira of the banquet, happily appearing before me without further ado. But where did you get that gorgeous garment? Ahem. That fantastically ornamented carapace, and you but a turtle living in the wastes of these mountains? I'll take you into the cave. You'll be of use, no dishonor intended, but primarily I can see it great profit for me. Though I perceive you do better to stay back at home. Danger lurks out there beyond the portal. Alive, you'll work as a charm against witchcraft. If you die, you'll make beautiful music. So he spoke, and lifting in both his hands the happy plaything, he took it into the cavern and scooped out its spinal marrow with a chisel of iron. And just as swift thought shoots right through the breast of a man when thronging anxieties distract him, or just as sparkling glances whirl from his eyes, so did it become the practice of noble Hermes to weave word and deed together in a single action. He cut reed stalks and attached them at measured spans through the shell of the tortoise, and with dexterity stretched an ox skin across it, put the horns in and their crosspiece, and set the 7 sheep gut strings. Once he'd completed its fashioning, he took up the happy contrivance and gave it a try with the plectrum, part by part. It sounded just fantastic under his fingers, and the god sang very well about whatever occurred to him, improvising like boys bandying taunts at some festival. And of what, first of all, did he improvise? He sang of Zeus and Maya, with the beautiful sandals, how once they too made love and begot him. He came out with the whole glorious business, and he winked in song at his mother's chamber girls and praised her glittering villas with their tripods distributed everywhere and their kettles overflowing. This is the important moment where suddenly, out of nowhere, it shifts. But even while he was striking off these ditties, other matters occupied his thought. He'd contrived a hankering for meat. So, stashing the hollow lyre in his cradle blankets, he was out again from his mother's sweet-scented dwelling, this time up to a lofty lookout, plotting high chicanery in his heart, such as subdullous persons pursue in black night, lusting after something. Helios was descending under the earth toward Okeanos with horses and car, and Hermes came scurrying along on his way toward the shadowy hills of Pieria. There, the immortal cows of the blessed gods had their stables and did their cow things in an uncut meadow, quite delightful. Of these, the son of Maia, the keen-sighted slayer of Argos, split off 50 loud bellowing heifers and drove the scattered lot of them across a sandy plain. Nor did he neglect this crafty stratagem. He caused their hooves to stride backward so that their front feet seemed back feet front, while he himself marched along in the conventional manner. I think that's enough.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. Sam, any comments that we should all be alerted to?
Well, Roni Stanley, she observes Krishna and Hermes, both herders of cows, that they both have this attribute. That would be one observation that's made, and that's got it. So maybe reaching towards some antecedent.
Anybody else want to make a comment or have a thought?
I mean, I would just say one thing if nobody else is going to say it is this use of the reversal of the hoofs is an interesting one to the extent that when one enters a sacred place, that things become backwards, that there's a reversal, a chiasma that needs to occur. I mean, for me, that was first introduced to me through the Huichol. When they arrive at the place of the peyote, the day before, they begin to speak backwards. If it's sunny, they say, "Oh, I wish it wasn't so cloudy." Day becomes night, etc., etc. Just saying.
Well, can I make an observation? This is Kim. I also have made an observation regarding Hermes, kind of receiving this role as a herder. He's known, in the ancient Greek world, as a psychopalm, which is a figure, a guidance of the souls, and so we have this connections of the god Apollo with this herd, so Hermes, like Jesus, the herder is the guidance of the soul. So these cows maybe represent the life-giving force of the soul. So like if the light of Apollo, the god of the suns, is the giving light of life, then he would be the guide for these souls to go through the cycle of the soul. So that could also be like an observation. So he's a psychopalm, and these cows are life, these different souls that were given by the light of the sun ray. So it's like a exchange, from the god of music and the note and measurement, and the god of the souls, the measure of the souls, and his role of the guides. So it's just an observation I made, reading these texts.
Kim, thank you so much. Chuck, did you want to respond to that? I also wanted to make a little comment.
I wanted to go back to actually the first thing that Joel said, that making the contrast between it being about Hermes or about being Hermeticism. Of course, it's about Hermes. That was the initial concern, but I'm also concerned with the question of what Hermeticism might be under the present circumstances. And so the notion was that Hermeticism itself has to be reinvented, because the way in which one uses doctrines of correspondences to create magical formula and so forth have to be readjusted to our present capacity for having views about the cosmos. Because the Hermetic view is basically the Neoplatonic view, wedded with all kinds of other materials joined together. But the view of the universe as an astrological series of concentric spheres, even with serious astrologers, have to rethink what that exactly is. So the point about it would be that for a Peter Lamborn Wilson and basic idea of a green Hermeticism, a reconvened Hermeticism, because Hermeticism sort of stands for the one site within the West, or one of the sites within the West, that is a syncretic view. Its concern is always to widen its perspective on whatever it's possible for the mind to think or imagine. So that's my notion, that in the reconvening of a Hermetic picture of a kind of universal esotericism or something, that the figure of Hermes is the figure that needs to be re-entertained. That of all the figures, Hermes is the one that is both most and least offended by the ignorance of his own godhood. Most offended in the sense that there's an automatic kind of tricksterism which enters into the world when the intellect is not understood in its true depth, but reduced to its technological availabilities. On the other hand, wherever actually Hermes is active, that is to say, wherever intuition and intelligence and imagination begin to reimagine a totality or a fullness of being, he's perfectly happy to have been ignored up till now. Well, that's what I say.
Kim, did you want to add something? We see that you raised your hand. Oh, okay.
Sorry, that was earlier. I'm going to
Okay,
take it down.
beautiful. And I also
Hi,
to
can you
thank.
hear me? Sorry, go ahead. It's Vincent here.
Oh, go ahead, please.
I'd like to just say something if this is the right time.
Right time.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would just like to, well, thank you for this presentation, which the whole thing is really fascinating. But I also would like to say kudos to Chuck. I'm actually working on my own translation of Theogony and Works and Days. So I just want to say like how pleasurable it is to hear your translations of Theogony and also the Homeric hymn. Well, especially Theogony, like knowing that poem really well, the subtlety of your word choices in English, and just the precision of how you really are bringing in all the details of the poem, because I feel like in previous translations that really hasn't been paid attention to. I feel like Hesiod he's been treated more as like a storehouse of information on either, mythology or ancient Greek farming, but he hasn't really received his due, in my opinion, as a poet. And I feel like your translations really bring that aspect of his craft to the fore. So I wanted to express that and thank you for your work.
I appreciate that. That's finally what I most care about. Yeah.
I also thank you so much, Vincent. And yes, we look forward to your translation and more conversation with you. And also, Joel, thank you so much for your thoughts about the work, both you and Michael, and your reading. And Joel, just to ask you, you made a reference to a text that you had referred to. If you could just, when you get a chance, put that in the chat. And any of our readers, if you make a reference to text, it would be nice if you put them in the chat. People might want to follow up with those.
Kim, before we go on, I just point out that Scott Smith posited, I recall reading somewhere that Hermes may have gathered mushrooms from the cow pies.
Gotta be
Bruce McPherson, he writes, Hermes, the born trickster, making one direction be seen as its opposite. And Matthew Morse clocks in with Widershins counterclockwise.
Wow.
Eric Davis states, it is a lesson in forked signs.
Okay, can I just throw in my poetic translation? I'm wondering if the cows could represent the months. Just a thought, something about time and the horns and the moon, you know.
The months?
Oh,
The months.
Yeah, that's what it is, and that's what it seems to be in the Veda, in the Rig Veda at least.
Ah, okay.
you know, in the connection with the Parmenides and the Odyssey is the subtle one. I mean, I deal with it somewhat, I think, somewhere in the book. But the cows that, you know, in the story of the Odyssey, Odysseus's men aren't killed because of the egregious crime of having put out Poseidon's son, the Cyclops' his eye. That's not actually why he loses his men. It's because his soldiers, I mean his sailors, have eaten cows belonging to the sun god when they stop at this island, Thrinakia. And he's been warned 3 times by Tiresias, by Circe, and somewhere else, I think, that whatever they should do, they don't stop at that island because that's where the cows of the sun are. And if you eat them, you'll all die. And he goes off and falls asleep because Odysseus is always falling asleep for things to happen. And by the way, in my view, following Karenyi, I think the real god of the Odyssey is Hermes, and that Athena is a historical addition to the story in order to bring it into the Athenian fold, because the conflict between Athena and Poseidon at the origins of Athens is part of the mythology of the origin of Athens. So it's the fact that Poseidon and Athena are the 2 main creatures and main gods in the Odyssey is basically showing that it's an Athenian version of the Odyssey that we have. Nonetheless, the cows of the sun god, and I think it's not unfair to read sun god into Apollo, that Apollo is a solar deity, that the sun god cows are the cause of the demise of Odysseus's sailors, but the daughters of the sun, namely the keepers of the cows, are the ones who direct the horses of Parmenides to the realm of the goddess. So there's some kind of a very interesting knot being tied there, which I haven't exactly untied. But there's something in the underground of these myths that are connected. The connection to the Indo-European and to the Vedas is certainly worth noting. Whether they represent the calendar at that point, I have no idea. I mean, in the point of the Odyssey and the Parmenides.
On to the poem of Parmenides with Mitch Highfill and Sam Truitt.
I first encountered Parmenides in this book, Being Equals Space Times Action, edited by Charles Stein. And then more recently have been reading this book, Reality, by Peter Kingsley, which comes to me via Kim, who got it from a mutual friend of ours who recently passed away, Barbara Bard. A picture of Barbara. An amazing book. Anyway, said that it's a particular take on Parmenides in Kingsley. So it's nice to have this new translation, and I'm going to start with, I'm going to read intermittently through it, starting with fragment 2. But come and I will instruct you. You must take back home with you what I say, whether in fact there are only these two ways for a thought to travel. Either is, and also that is not. And this is the path of which one ought to be persuaded, for it leads to truth. Or is not, and also that is, cannot be. And I say that this is an unconvincing road. It doesn't turn. You cannot know what in fact has no being. This is impossible, and you cannot speak of it. Fragment 3, the same is to think is and to be. Fragment 6. It is necessary to know and to say that being is. For the other way, the thought is not, cannot be. Is and cannot be. Is not. Think about this. Now I must dissuade you not only from taking that one of these two courses, but also from another upon which mortals wander double-minded, not knowing anything, for only ineptitude straightens the errant thought in their minds. They are carried along blind and obtuse, these utterly astonished ones, that indiscriminate horde, by whom the to be as well as the not to be are thought of as the same, and at the same time, not the same. And that the track down which everything passes is backward turning. Fragment 7. For you are never going to put this thought to rest, that things that are not are. So urge your thoughts off this duplicit pathway, and don't let well-worn habit force you down it. Don't let your eye wander. Don't let your tongue wag. Don't allow your ear to echo aimlessly. Rather judge by thought the much disputed proof which I've spoken. Fragment 8. There is only one path left, and that is. And on it there are many indications that being is unengendered, that it cannot be broken apart, for it is whole without parts, that being does not fluctuate, that it has no end. It never was, it never will be. It is all now, one, continuous. For what sort of engendering can be sought for it? How and from what source might it have grown? And do not say and do not think that it came out of not being, for it cannot be said and it cannot be thought that is not. How might it come to be and afterward pass out of being? For if it came into being, then is not. And what need could have driven it to grow starting from nothing at some time earlier rather than at some later time? Therefore, either is or else is not, and in either case, completely so. Nor shall strength of trust incite anything to come into being out of not being, severed from is itself. On account of this, therefore, Dike neither loosens her grip so that being might come into being, or that being might perish, but she holds fast. And the crisis in these matters lies in this: either is or is not. Now, surely it has been decided, according to what is necessary, to abandon the nameless and unthinkable alternative for a true way that is not, and that the other way, that is real and genuine. How could is afterward pass out of being? How might it come to be? For if it came into being, then it is not, and is not also, if is only going to be. So the alternative, coming into being, is extinguished, and of going out of being, nothing can be discerned, nor can being be segmented, since it is altogether of a single piece. Nor does it exceed itself or fail to reach itself, thereby disrupting the continuity of itself. But being is everywhere replete, everywhere continuous, and all of it connected, close to all of itself. But without motion, locked within the limit of mighty bonds, without beginning, and not to be brought to an end, since both coming into being and passing out of being had been banished far away by true belief, the same in the same, remaining with itself, it lies where it is, for strong necessity has locked it in limiting bonds and imprisons it all about. Nor is it lawful for being to remain uncompleted. Being lacks nothing, for if it lacked one thing, it would lack all. Because of this, therefore, to think and the thing thought are the same thing, namely being. For you will not find thought without the being about which that thought is uttered. And nothing is or ever will be outside of what is, since fate has fashioned being to remain a changeless whole. And all the other designations which mortals have laid down, having trusted them to be true, are only names, namely coming into being and going out of being, and the mixture of the two, not being and being together, alteration of brightness and color and change of place. However, since there is an uttermost limit, it is fully established on every side, resembling in dignity and mass a well-rounded sphere, equally distributed, balanced in every direction. For it must not come out somewhat greater in one place, somewhat smaller or more humble in the next, as neither does not being exist to prevent it from accosting its like, nor can being be either more or less than being is, in one place as over against another place, since all of it is inviolable, equidistant from everywhere, and all of it alike within its bounds. Thank you.
And what I'm going to read is from Chuck's exegesis and commentaries on the poem of Parmenides, and what he's able to draw out of it, and what constitutes this horizon that we're meeting on. There are three things that I'm kind of interested in. One is to try to get at what does Parmenides mean in his exegesis around the nature of is and is not, of being and everything else in the realm of appearance. And also I want to try to latch on to the notion that, Plato hijacked Western Civ 2,500 years ago, and try to figure that part out. Yeah. And then the third thing is how Parmenidean insight may relate to poetry, to the practice of poetry. So I'm not going to accomplish any of these things, but I hope that it might prove food for thought and for discussion. And also the sections I'm going to read, more or less, are just sort of following a path of desire, you might say, or that where I landed on the surface of the ocean and dove in and came back out and then dove in again. So I'm not trying to build any kind of argument per se, just trying to pause, read some things and open it for us to talk or think some more. So the first thing I'm going to quote is from the preface, just two sentences. Heidegger says somewhere that something yet to be thought, even in modern times, enters the Western tradition in Parmenides's poem. The project, that is Chuck's project, is to think this thing that for Heidegger was yet to be thought. And I just wanted to, I'm not going to do this throughout, but it did occur to me to notice Bell Hooks's essay, Theory as Liberatory Practice. In her last paragraph, she quotes from Catherine McKinnon, who reminds us that, quote, "We know things with our lives, and we live that knowledge beyond what any theory has yet theorized," period, end quote. Bell Hooks writes, "Making this theory is the challenge before us." Then quoting from introduction to the poem of Parmenides. Again, a couple sentences. "If being is undivided, I myself am not divided from it. To grasp it requires no flash or illumination in addition to grasping that effect as a unio mystica. If being is indestructible and uncreated, so am I. There is no need to mention immortality, since what is immortal is inseparable from being itself." Then from the start of the section on what can be done, I would read from this first paragraph, Notes on Parmenides. "Consider the arrival of Parmenides' thought of unique being as a moment of completion that is simultaneously the initiation of dispersion. Parmenides culminates through the discovery of logic, a feeling for the sacred that is evinced in the temple architecture of Egypt in Greece. Sacred geometry, proportion, and number prefigure the strictures of Parmenidean justice and logic. With the three generations that follow Parmenides, Zeno, Socrates, Plato, the worship, intellect, and constitution of the polis focused on Eleatic vision fall asunder. Namely, Parmenides lived in Ilia and on the east coast of Italy, fall asunder. It is the Parmenidean sparagmos or Dionysian mangle, the body of the law ravaged, the light too hot. And then Chuck goes on to articulate three things that would constitute a state of discipline falling within the Parmenidean demand. And these are the three things: that thinkers refrain from asserting being of anything other than being itself. That, quote, "the things that appear in every case be understood as reporting being, but in themselves failing of being." That the impulse to assert that the appearances are an impulse arising from the unique is to which all appearances refer be inhibited. Moving on, that the things do not exist, but that they appear is not to challenge the dignity of the things. Rather, all appearances, all particular things are situated as occasions of the unique value, liberated from conflicting claims of being, from assertions of identity, from competition for existence, survival, status, or worth, the intimacy that every apparent thing shares with unique being becomes accessible as its value. Each thing in its appearance communes with its nothingness from its nothingness. From its nothingness with being. Each thing rests in its concreteness, its individual character, precisely to the degree that it abrogates the claim of being and allows its own apparency to settle into the transparency to being. Whereas Platonic thought denigrates the specificity of each transitory existent before the ideality of the form it instantiates, Parmenidean being allows each appearance to participate in the sacredness of being by pointing through itself toward it. Here, no hierarchy is possible, for each appearance provides an access to being itself. To recognize that something appears is to access being as that to which, through its instigation of the claim of being, it truly refers. The sacred reeks of the violence that severs the sacred thing from the profanity in contrast to which it shines. But where unique being is recognized as the sacred, no such violence arises, for being is at once rejoined to its other, the appearances, since everything that seems must seem to be.
Sam, thank you. Are you continuing?
I can go on and on. That's enough.
That's the crux of the matter you got there. Or the appearance, the appearance of the crux. Beautiful.
Yeah, to the open secret is really perhaps what we're talking about. It's a little bit analogous, I've always felt, to Nietzsche saying that, you know, that the nature of speech is inherently ironic, that we know that words are not things, they don't represent that to which they point. So there's always an ironic aspect to anything that we say or hear, which he characterized as a sort of implicit wink. Which seems to me a hermetic state. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh boy.
Speaks very well for itself. I mean, it's difficult to read because of the, you know, the tonal part. Like, I'm not totally sure I got that right. Chuck would have to tell me that, but I tried anyway.
I have a comment for Sam. Could you say more about the notion of appearance of being? It's semantically ambiguous and challenging to think that they are continuous with each other, given that the very grammar of appearing of something keeps the appearance separate from the being that appears. So,
Ed, could I add that?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
The ambiguity is something I've been struggling right from the beginning, and my choice is to keep it in the sense that if I mean by the appearance of being some specific appearance claiming to be as it appears, in one sense, that's an appearance of being, because it's being that only gets to appear through the claims of being of its appearances. On the other hand, it's not the appearance of being because being doesn't appear. So that's precisely the ontological paradox that's sitting at the root. or one of the versions, that whenever you attempt to give it a coherent definition, what you end up with is a duality that's violating the very thing that it's supposed to define. It's a kind of truth teller's paradox. It's sort of the inversion of the liar's paradox, that precisely by saying that this sentence is true, you give it the lie. Rather than that this sentence is false. Yeah. So I don't know that's as far as I can go, and without an endless logical complexity, which actually you can draw out. That's what people do with the Parmenidean aspect of Plato, is to focus in on the semantic paradoxes.
Well,
the third man problem, etc., of the sophist and the Parmenides.
Well, one other question here. I mean, so does appearance require a witness? And if it requires a witness, haven't we unduly complicated the monolithic character of being?
Well, yeah, by actually asking for the witness. That the terms of pure being, pure awareness are in fact, my joke is to say being is one word too many, but it's the only word about which you can say that. And so that reality, existence, all the various other things which look like the same thing actually are already prejudicing how it's going to be understood.
Billie wanted to say something.
Yeah.
I have no idea whether this relates to what you're talking about, but I was very interested in reading the translation of the Pandora passage about this first descriptor of her appearance, which Chuck translated as entity, and some other translations translate as image. And I was very interested in whether she was a being or a person or an image or an entity, and what that had to do with and the relationship between what is what seems to be is what is.
Well, I think what you did with it is exactly what I imagined. Namely, that question is not answered. What all we have is in our understanding of what historical poetry is, and that she appears as a event in it. But insofar as it's being offered as a possible context for understanding being, that's kind of the reader's work. It isn't, an assertion isn't being made about whether any of these figures really exist. It's that they are the question about them is reopened in our time, because exactly what they are is related to the question of being. It's like it's only when you don't go all the way to asking about being that the question about do the gods exist, do they not exist, are they human imagination, are they cultural products, etc., etc. It's only when you don't go all the way to the question of being that those questions seem to be answerable. Where the real question is, what's the relationship between our capacity to imagine this and being itself? And no one can answer that except for each person in their own being.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's to reject the whole thing, you decide you want to be some kind of Catholic or atheist or whatever, Islamic fundamentalist. You can choose that. What's to stop you? Other than another ontology which says that's impossible, you can't do that. We're actually free, is my view. Is that I kind of almost like a Sartrean existentialist say we really are free about these ultimate matters, and we create these doctrines that are kinds of institutions to enforce what, to prevent us from being anxious about our own being. And my own soteriology is to say there's no way beyond that anxiety except going through it. By dealing with these ultimate paradoxes,
You know, this is
and not diving and not diving into nihilism as a solution.
This
Can
is,
I add something? I'm sorry.
please.
If we're going on too long, I can say.
No, please. We want to hear from you.
Um,
Hey, Alana.
Hi, I was just going to say that I have a response which I feel like has been an accumulation of what several people have said, stemming from what Joel brought up of the Hermes as a living figure, and then the Hermetic tradition, and question of what Sam brought up of the Parmenides presence in the Western canon and its relationship to poetry. And as I've been listening, I've been thinking about the statements of Parmenides as an alternative encapsulation of the living lineage of poetry, as this way in which the living presence of a poem evades reification or diagnosis or an ability to turn into a doctrine, and that all of the schools of thought or historical references towards like this school of poetry grew out of this, grew out of that, that all of those are in a way historically bound or temporally bound, and that the lineage of Parmenides in relationship to poetry is in a sense the trickiness of how the Hermetic tradition, as Chuck pointed out, is so syncretic and holds that space. But in the same way, that space opens up to the actual the meeting of a presence that you could call divine, and how it's almost the accomplishment of poetry or Parmenides that they haven't been institutionalized, or that they haven't become predominant in discourse. And I have more to say, but just that vantage.
Wow, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Alana.
I think it's super interesting. I mean, I don't think it's possible to posit a poetics out of Parmenides. It would be, that doesn't work. But it did occur to me, like there's the common phrase, which I guess was John Cage, something like, poetry makes nothing happen. Or Chernicoff, who said something like, you can say anything in prose, so poetry should be reserved for saying nothing. And the nature of that nothing, of the no thing, of seeking that which is implicit in and prior to and beyond the thing, which is this being and being, that's the kind of poetic flicker that I am interested in, I guess, out of this material per se. Maybe.
I wanted to thank Ed Casey for his very rigorous question remark, and I think that's a very rich conversation, and perhaps we'll go back to that matter at the end of the readings, because I know we just opened up Pandora's box, so to speak.
The one thing, Kimberly, there were some comments. Should we feed those into the forum?
If they're relevant, absolutely. And then we'll go on to the next poem or next text.
Yeah. Sandra Sawyer, she writes, connectivity is not endless. And then she writes, amen. And then Joe Softy, he writes, I can almost make it back to Hermes from here, but the links are a bit tenuous. And then Matthew Morse, he writes, a foregrounding of being in this seeming, in quotes, relative world, ? Is this great completion possible without a flash or flashes of mystical union?
Well, that's of course that passage is from my rebuttal of Muralatus's attempt to deny that there's any kind of soteriological meaning at all in the poem. So those remarks are precisely in relationship to his remarks. So I wouldn't take them as that I could defend them outside of that context unless we got into a detailed conversation, really. That's what I could say. That, and as far as to Joe, the links are not like links in a chain, that they're suggestions. And I obviously am starting with the fact that you've got two poems that are specifically about Hermes and the alchemy stuff implicitly, but it's really if there's some kind of a twisted claim, it would be that it's pertinent to think about, first of all, the various Greek sites of mystical material, particularly the Eleusinian mysteries from my other book, with the Hermes figure. Once you expand the way the Hermes figure gets expanded into the Hermes Trismegistus. So the link is really between the fact that you have Hermes Trismegistus as a character who's being initiated by a god figure who is really Hermes Trismegistus, although he calls himself the mind of the authentic one. But it's clear that the unio mystica, the joining of the individual with the ultimate, that's what he's being initiated into. He's leaving off his differentiations into a psychological being with multiple energies and types, and entering into a more transcendent nature of his own identity, which goes very nicely with the Osiris story, the way I tell it. So, I'm not forging links in a logical system that could be then defended or not defended. That's not really what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to suggest imaginative possibilities, because it's certainly taking the idea that whereas in reasoning, the thinking function for the most part is what you have to deal with, but for an ultimate quest of the realization of one's actual nature, if such a thing is possible, it's going to be on the level of intuition, not on the level of discursive reasoning. And that's what the whole point of the induction of Parmenides, in my view, was about. So what I'm saying is that the poem of Parmenides is an attempt to create an initiation, which is in fact the ultimate position of a Hermetic initiation. Not all the stuff in between, but as an essential grounding or orienting of what a Hermetic process might have to be reconvened as under present times. Because anyway.
Can I actually make? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment, kind of regarding, just to backtrack to the myth, and Hermes' roles as a liberator of beings, is that we learn from Aeschylus, from his play, Prometheus Unbound, that is actually Hermes as the liberators who kind of set forth the entire motion for the Odysseys and the Iliad, starting from, liberating Prometheus and retrieving the prophecies, and, was kind of like set forth the motions of, the apple of Paris, the judgment of Paris, and so there's all these, we have to remember that is in his role as the liberator of being, from liberating Prometheus, that's Hermes kind of set forth this entire, traditions of the Homeric poem, going from the marriage of Thetis to the judgment of Paris, to all the way, to the Iliad, the Odysseys, when he reached out his hand to after the telemarchy to bring Odysseus into his journey back home. So it's this entire thing, wouldn't happen if Hermes didn't liberate Prometheus from the very first place and set forth the marriage of Thetis and Peleus. So there's, I think there's a crucial, I guess, roles that he does as, as the liberator of the mind, of being. this kind of suggested, this kind of more Buddhist role that he do is to liberate the being, Prometheus, that the souls, the fire that is changed in each being. Just kind of like an observation I made, in his.
Kim, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chuck, did you want to respond briefly and then we'll move on to the next text?
Well, just to say that you can open up lots and lots of doors to a Hermes that is not the conventional picture of Hermes. And the Aeschylus one is certainly one, the whole question of relationship between Prometheus and Hermes. But like I say, I only could do the ones that I had actually worked out. And some of them were new, but for the most part, there's endless more. And that's kind of the point, really.
All right, well, I'm certain that we're going to delve back into that. Well, maybe appropriately the next one. Go ahead.
We have more material that has appeared in the chat, and one of them is from Menachen Kallis, and he's raised his hand if he would like to speak to it. One thing that came up is John Cage actually said, "I have nothing to say, and I am saying it, and that is poetry as I needed it." Thanks, Roni. And then yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say what I wrote, more or less, which is that it seems that appearances are what we experience as things going into and out of being. And it's because we don't want to say that going out of being means going into non-being, because non-being is banished, like Parmenides says. And we're apparently not content in saying that things are just going out of being, and I don't know what happens after that. That we problematize the issue, and rather than just saying that there is a mystery about appearances, and just leave it at that.
Well, that's what I mean. Because if what the question of the verisimilitude, say, of an appearance is raised, what happens is you see that whether or not the appearance is verisimilitudinous, the claim of being is still evoked. So in that sense, the meaning of being is present even if the appearance is false. I mean, that's not exactly the question that you raised. It's a question of radical transiency, that the radical transiency doesn't just go away. It turns out we have all kinds of ways in which the only thing that's really a transitory is instantaneous sensation. That really goes away, but it leaves traces. So the question about traces is the question of the most abstract or general meaning of the word of appearance. In other words, is there appearance that's other than trace? Is there appearance that corresponds to something that what its appearance of? And the only thing that's universal in appearance is that it's claiming that there's something that is as it shows itself in its appearance. And so the meaning of being is evoked wherever appearances occurs, whether or not the appearance is disappearing. The origin of the appearance is an instantaneous sensation that really disappears, or whether it's something else that's the consequence of our construction, whether that construction is by rational means or by a dream or by what we hear somebody says or what we perceive with any of our senses and construct cognitively. All of that's going on, and all of that is appearance. And the thing that corresponds most to it is Sankhya dualism. You know what I'm talking about? Menachem, you know what I mean? Yeah.
No.
The dualism. Oh, okay. In the early Hindu development of theosophy, really in the period of the around the beginning of a common era for a couple of thousand years around it. There are these structures that are very much like Abhidharma structures. They give the multiplicity of different things of which things are composed. And the ultimate position is a division between Prakriti and Purusha. And Purusha is the person. It's a Vedic God name, but it means the being, the Atman, the true being. And Prakriti is all the phenomena. So the division between mind and body, or appearance and reality, or res cogitans and res extensa, that is divided in Western thought, in which thought is on, as it were, the Purusha side, by having the dualism between the mind, the thinking substance, and the extended substance. It takes the thinking substance, the mens cogitan, and puts it on the side of pure being. Whereas in the Hindu system, the only thing that Purusha is pure consciousness. It's not the content. It's not nature. Prakriti often translates nature.
That sounds a lot more like Parmenides.
So yeah, and then of course you do have, in the various different classical Hindu systems, you have a Samkhya dualism, or you have its transcendence in an Advaita position, in which the ultimate being is the Atman Brahman as one, and as beyond this distinction between Prakriti and Purusha. But it's always that the Purusha side is leaning towards the ultimate, and is differentiated from the nature side. And that's what sounds is like Parmenides. I haven't actually written that up except in notes somewhere, but it's something I definitely will include in something. That's a big piece of it. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm reading from the Poemandras, as is Dorota. And in Chuck's note, he states that this is that his translation is from the Greek text in Hermetica, the ancient Greek and Latin writings which contain religious or philosophical teachings ascribed to Hermes Trismegistus. I was thinking about everything. Suddenly my mind shot up and my senses everted, but not as in a stupor, not drunk or sated. And it seemed to me that something very big, completely unbounded, immeasurable, called my name. What do you want to hear and what behold and what to learn and know by minding it, it said. Who are you, I said. I am the Poemandras, the mind of the authentic one. Then I want to know everything, I said. I have what you want and am with you everywhere. Hold in mind what you wish to learn and I'll teach you. Everything changed, everything opened, and I saw a boundless view. Everything turned into light, all mild and happy. I was amazed. But then in a moment again, everything changed. A downward tending darkness, ferocious and grim, had overcome a part of it. A downward tending darkness, ferocious and grim, had become a part of it. And I saw the darkness change to a watery nature, a perturbation unspeakable. It exuded smoke as from fire, and it made a noise, I cannot describe it, as if of interminable wailing, and an unarticulated cry originated out of it. But from the light, a holy word came out. And it stood on the watery nature, and it seemed to me this word was the voice of the light. And Poemandras said to me, so I could hear it, do you know what you behold, what it means? Tell me, I said. That light, he said, I am it, mind, the first God. He who was before the watery nature came out of the dark, and the one that came out of the light is the Logos, the word son of this God. What then? Know by looking at, by listening to, that which is in you, that the word is the son of the mind, and that they do not stand apart from each other, for life is the oneness of them. But mind the light and study it. Thank you, I said. And when he had imparted all this, for a long time he fixed his gaze on me, and I shook from his look. And when I lifted my eye, I beheld in my mind how the light was composed of innumerable powers, and it had become an unbounded world. From this book, I'm not sure where